Today's discussion is on technology and how it is used within the PBIS system. This is an evaluation document, a book chapter that I wrote with Michael McCreary, and we had published back in 2015. The idea behind this is to learn how to evaluate new technology as it comes along. And folks want to use it, but they don't necessarily know how, or if it's really empirically based. So we're going to have that discussion. So this should look really familiar to you, RTI being for the academics and PBS being for behavioral, and both of them falling under MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support. If you're unfamiliar with this at this point in time, you should talk to me. So just to remember of these three-tiered models, for tier 1, everybody gets it. Tier 2, it tends to be a targeted, often a group kind of project. And tier 3 is often intensive, often individual, smaller group. And with the assessments, you need to be assessing them regularly. Usually with tier 1, it's about 3 times a year. Tier 2, it's at least once per month, but usually once per week. And then tier 3, it's at least once per week. So whenever you're talking about putting technology into place, it can either be for the intervention itself or for the assessment tool that you are using. So I'm going to go through a couple of just generic tier 1 and tier 2 interventions that are commonly used, and then we'll talk about how these have been altered or their concepts pulled out into a technology-based format. So this one, I like this one a lot. Stop and Think. It's the kind of thing that requires $0. There is much research to support it. It's also called the problem-solving model, or teaching problem-solving skills. And what you do with this is you have a poster in the room that looks like this thing on the left, and then all of the steps are on the right. And if something happens with a child, you would review these steps with them. And so, for instance, if the stimulus is another child breaks in front of you in line at the cafeteria, and Bobby punched him in the face. Okay, so if you're pulling Bobby aside, you then would review these with them. What was the point where you should have paused and removed yourself from the situation? And then think of all the things you can do. And this thinking part can be really fun in that kids can think of things that are realistic and things that are silly. I could have called the dinosaurs to come eat him, whatever. And then part of choosing is going through, but there really aren't any dinosaurs. I can't really choose that option. So they go through and they choose all the possible options and go through what all the possible responses were, what would have happened. And then you have them mock doing it. So you do a little role play with them where you're breaking in front of them in line as if they're standing in line, and then have them do it. And then they look back and evaluate it. You can also do this if you catch them being good. So if you see children using good social skills, you can stop for the whole class and then walk through the steps that might have been used for them to determine these, and use these better skills. So this can be at a tier 1 level. It can be at a tier 2 level if you're just targeting one child and you're having, meetings with them separately to go through these skills. But it can also be done at the tier 1 level, wherein that you come up with mock scenarios and the kids practice them, or, and you put these posters around the room and things like that. So there's another option too, tier 1 or tier 2, second step. In this particular set of slides, you're going to have lots of videos that provide examples. So the best way for you to learn about second step is through linking to this short video. There's a ton of research for this. It's all kinds of interactive. It's a great little set of tools. It's developmental in nature, that the kindergarten tools have the puppets, and the middle school materials have, are much less play related. And so this can be done either for an entire class. It is considered a curriculum, or you can do it with a small referred population of kids. So I will expect you, when you see these links to the short videos, to pause, watch the short video, and then come back. Welcome back. Here are some parent training. So this really isn't a tier 1 or a tier 2. It's not a tier 2 or a tier 3. It could be considered a tier 1, wherein that if you have a school where a lot of the issues have to do with home discipline issues, these are parent training programs that can be offered. These I kind of put in order of the parents' previous knowledge about discipline. So parents who really need very foundational skills, Parenting SOS is great. It shows videos and you can work, and it's got an entire parent training set of materials, and you can work with the parents to get, pardon me, to get them to practice these skills. 1-2-3 Magic is actually what we used with my daughter, and it's a little bit more advanced than Parenting SOS, but not quite that much. And then Parenting with Love and Logic tends to be for parents who have the fundamentals, but they need additional skills. All right, so I just threw that in just so that you would have it. And these are links to materials. These links do not take you any kind of training videos, so they're for your use only later. Okay. So we're going to now talk specifically about how these types of things may be changed into a technology-based method. So one of the first things to think about is this concept of differentiated instruction. You may have a class, average class 20 to 30 kids, but you can't teach them all the same way. And so this gives a better idea, I think, of differentiated instruction than you'll see multiple places, in that if you have this many kids, about 10% of the ones that are in general ed are also in special ed, so they have IEPs. And each one of their IEPs requires some difference in instruction. Then you will also have kids that are gifted. And, there's not very many, about 2%, but they're going to need different instruction, differentiated instruction. And you may even have kids that are both gifted and in special education, because you can have a dual diagnosis of gifted and learning disabled, or gifted and have ADHD and things like that. And then you have kids that are maybe not gifted, but they are advanced. And so you'll have a handful of those, about 14%. And then you have the kids that aren't intellectually disabled, but they're kind of just slower. And those are called slow learners. And so these are the kids 71 IQ to about 84 IQ. And when you take a look here, you can see that the teacher needs to teach to all of the kids in the class who are not requiring differentiated instruction. And then they also have to consider differentiated instruction for each of these children. And each of the ones who are circled in green are going to need their own instruction. And then maybe you can put the dark blue in a single group, and maybe with the light blue. And then you can put the darker red in a single group, but maybe not. So in this, you may be teaching something at 5, 6, 7 different levels. And that's kind of a nightmare when you have this many kids. So one way that people have thought of as a possible solution to all this differentiation is that you have you're moving from teacher-led interventions and data collection to possibly computer-led interventions and data collection. So these are the same evaluation tools, hopefully, that we have gone over in previous discussions. If not, it's just a quick review. Sugai and Horner, they put forward these set of guidelines just for evaluating any interventions, not specifically for technology. So, they break these out: efficiency, relevancy, and durability. So effectiveness is, did it work? And ideally, you have research to support that it worked. Efficiency, what's the cost benefit analysis? Relevancy, Is it contextually appropriate for this classroom, this school, these kids, this teacher? And then durable. Will it be something that can be sustained? Is it something that can go forward? So within effectiveness, this is a really big issue. A lot of technology-based tools are so new that there is no research support for them. And Coffey and Horner stress that practitioners cannot afford to experiment on the students themselves on things that have not been proven effective. But on the other hand, teachers want to be able to start implementing these tools right away. If they see them and they think this could work, they want to use them. And in addition, so for do that, you're going to have to determine a set of effectiveness standards to decide if you think they work. Because if the teachers are going to use them anyway, you've got to measure their effectiveness. And if there's no data that exists, then you may need to be the one to run the pilot study. Make sure that you differentiate if it's a tier 1 or tier 2. For tier 1, you're going to probably want to investigate statistically significant differences, maybe a control group or a not control group, or Mrs. Smith's class and Mrs. Jones' class, whereas a tier 2 can use some of the single subject design options. Efficiency. When you're dealing with efficiency, you have to consider a lot of things, but with efficiency with technology, you're also going to have to think about, do the computers work? Do they have computers? Are you going to have to invest in hardware? How much money for training? How much money for tech support? How much money to replace the things the kids break? And then the cost of the software. And a lot of these educational softwares have licenses, which means you can't just buy them once, you have to buy them over and over again. Then relevancy. Does the district buy into the idea of technology-based interventions, particularly this one? Does the teacher buy into it? So when we talk a little bit later in the set of materials about computers teaching social skills, a lot of folks just don't even buy into that as part of their pedagogy. Computers to them cannot teach this. You have to learn social skills by being social. Some folks just don't want to change. And then is it relevant? Do you have folks who can come in and work with the teacher? Do you have consultants who know technology well enough that they can help implement it? And are there IT support folks who can come in and help provide support? Durability. This has nothing to do with whether or not the equipment's going to break. That's not what this is. It really has to do with, is it going to maintain after you're done? So you come in, you get a grant, you put forward this really great technology-based tool. The grant runs out, there's no money for it, the tool ends, the end, right? So what are things that maybe affects durability? Things like, do you have a coordinated effort between multiple people? Do people value it enough to continue funding it? Do the personnel really understand it? And do they buy into it? And do they think it's effective? So these same 4 things that we would use in regular evaluation of interventions are true for technology-based ones as well. So we're going to go through a couple of technology-based interventions and data collection tools. So the PBIS assessment system, one of the really cool things about this, if you go to their website, you can actually, this says demo, but neither one of these are really demos. These are both videos to describe them. But you can actually go in and play with an artificial data set that they have available to you. If you want to get to know this program better, it's really kind of cool. Fake classrooms and data and stuff built. But for the sake of this class, I've provided to you, the information about PBIS Swiss. So just kind of go to that video. And it's considered a tier 1 intervention with the data for the data assessment, tracking and monitoring at a tier 1 level. I also have provided some information about something called ClassDojo. Millions and millions of people are using ClassDojo, and even though I have published research on the efficacy of this program, there's so little out there. And so anyway, so you cannot go forward, just because these are the videos that the publishers are putting out and saying, hey, these are great. Or even if you have independent people who are evaluating them, if they're not using the 4 criteria that we just went through, effectiveness, efficiency, et cetera, then they're just saying they like it. And a lot of times people like tech-based tools. They're, fun or easy, or the kids respond well or whatever. Doesn't mean that they're good. So take a look at these two videos. All right, welcome back. So you're going to be hypothesizing tier one, I don't know what that V is, effectiveness. For PBI, SWIS, and ClassDojo, you've had a chance to look through it. Neither of these really have a strong research basis. Like they just really don't. There's not a lot of research to support them as they are. So what the publishers of these programs argue is that we didn't need to conduct new technology-based research because research supports the use of the underlying constructs of what the intervention is trying to do. And so the underlying constructs are these techniques on the left-hand side, sorry, on the right-hand side. On the right-hand side, there's a table of techniques. So these have already been research-based and proven to be effective, at least for some kids in some level. And then there's more definition of them. So what you're going to be doing is going through what you now know about these two programs based on the videos you just watched and pulling out what techniques that the publishers are saying are research-based techniques. Therefore, there's not a need for a technology-based research for these techniques because they were fine paper and pencil. All right, so that was in your worksheet. Now we're going to talk about some tier 2 options. So we have the Social Express, which is something I've done research on for both tier 1 and tier 2. It's a great little program, except maybe only at the tier 1 level. Tier 2 support doesn't really indicate that it's all that great. And the problem is that the publishers, they were surprised by these findings. They really thought that because these programs met these techniques, etc., that they were founded on. In fact, Social Express is founded on Winter's social learning curriculum. That should have been sufficient and it should have worked. So here's just some information about the Social Express without discussing my particular study. You can see a demo of it. It looks great. And then this person just goes on and on about how much they love it. And the kids really did like it. All right. And so then we also have with the PBI SWIS, they have some intervention tools as well as data collection specific to something called check-in and check-out. You have a 2-minute long video here of check-in and check-out as it's just done. And so that is one of those things that tends to be done paper and pencil. And then the SWIS version of it, PBI SWIS, is just that instead of them doing it on paper and pencil, there's a computer app that they come and talk to you with. All right, you're going to do the exact same thing. Because we've already gotten some of the research on the Social Express, I'm not going to make you kind of go through this, although feel free to read our study if you want. But I do want you to go into the check-in and check-out for the PBIS SWIS here. All right, so we're going to do, so this, by the way, is also on your worksheet. So we're going to do a case conceptualization for consultation, remembering that the a priori questions are here, and then your interventions, these are kind of things that you're going to be doing, your target and your action, okay? So you're going to evaluate some of the interventions just like we did. And so here's your case conceptualization. You have a teacher that needs help because now the school's doing PBS and she just wants a computer to track it all for her. She has 22 children in third grade classroom. She's been teaching for a while. She knows how to use email, but otherwise she doesn't know how to use tech support. And the school set up a generic PBS system, but that they didn't put a technology-based one in place. But she wants tech to just fix it for her and just do it for her. So, going back up here, you need to determine which of the questions you think apply to her. So choose one or more. And then you're going to figure out what type of intervention it is. So who is it targeted? Is it client-centered, consultee-centered, and then system-centered? And if it is, what subtype is it? And then what action? And in this, you're going to use one of the interventions that we have already discussed in today's lecture and go through and evaluate it for effectiveness. For these steps: effectiveness, efficiency, relevancy, and durability. And just discuss what you know here and what your concerns are. And remembering, some of this may be that since you're the consultant, if you yourself aren't tech savvy, you may have issues with this. All right, so this is also part of your work for this class today. So I hope that this was helpful, and I hope that you learned a little bit about how to take things that exist but aren't researched to determine if they can still be used in the classroom.